The dust never settled in Iraq. Daniel Mercer had learned this 3 months into his assignment, watching the fine particles of ancient Mesopotamia coat everything, his camera equipment, his notebooks, his lungs. Now, in November 2003, as he crouched beside the shattered remains of a bridge outside Fallujah, he wondered if the dust carried something more than sand and clay, something older. "You sure about this, Danny?" Marcus Wright, his cameraman, adjusted the heavy equipment bag on his shoulder. Sweat streaked through the grime on his dark face, creating abstract patterns that reminded Daniel of cuneiform tablets he'd photographed in Baghdad's looted museums. Daniel wiped his lens with a cloth that only redistributed the dust. "The story's down there, Marcus. Look at those stones. Below the bridge's twisted concrete and rebar, massive blocks of weathered limestone protruded from the riverbank like broken teeth." The Euphrates had receded in recent weeks, exposing foundations that hadn't seen daylight in millennia. Local contractors had been hired to assess the bridge's structural integrity for potential repairs, but work had stopped 3 days ago. The foreman, a weathered Iraqi named Hassan, claimed his men heard voices from beneath the stones. Voices of the dead, Hassan had told Daniel in broken English. Very old dead. Before Islam, before Christ. We do not go there anymore. But Daniel was 42, old enough to have covered conflicts from Kosovo to Afghanistan, and young enough to still believe that truth was worth pursuing wherever it led. His editor at the Washington Herald wanted human interest pieces about reconstruction efforts. Daniel suspected he'd found something far more significant. Their third team member, Dr. Sarah Chen, emerged from behind the bridge's concrete abutment carrying a tablet loaded with archaeological survey software. The linguistics professor had taken a leave of absence from Georgetown to document the war's impact on Iraq's cultural heritage. Her black hair was pulled back severely, and her wire-rimmed glasses caught the late afternoon sun. "The inscriptions are definitely pre-Islamic," she said without preamble. "But there's something unusual about the script. It's a mixture of Aramaic and Hebrew, which shouldn't exist in this region during any known historical period." Daniel shouldered his camera bag. Meaning whoever carved these stones was either historically ignorant or recording something that predates our understanding of the region's linguistic development. Sarah's academic precision couldn't quite mask her excitement. "Daniel, some of these symbols, they're referencing biblical texts, specifically apocalyptic literature." Marcus groaned. "Doc, please tell me we're not chasing some Da Vinci Code bullshit. The Book of Revelation isn't fiction to everyone, Marcus." Sarah's voice carried an edge. Chapter 9, verse 14. "Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." The temperature seemed to drop despite the desert heat. Daniel looked down at the exposed stones, noting for the first time how they were arranged, 4 massive blocks forming corners around a dark opening that descended into the earth. Each block bore deep carvings, symbols that seemed to writhe in the shifting light. "You think this is some kind of religious site?" Daniel asked. "I think," Sarah said carefully, "that someone went to extraordinary effort to keep something contained down there. The entrance was narrow, forcing them to descend single file into darkness that their flashlights could barely penetrate. The air grew cooler with each step, carrying a metallic scent that reminded Daniel of blood mixed with sulfur. Ancient stone steps, worn smooth by countless feet, led them down a corridor whose walls were covered in inscriptions. Marcus's camera light swept across the symbols as they walked. "Jesus, how far down does this go?" "The structure appears to extend well below the river's current level," Sarah said, running her fingers along the carved text. "These inscriptions, they're warnings. Let no man break the seal. Here lie bound those who fell from grace. The river holds them until the appointed time." The corridor opened into a circular chamber perhaps 30 feet in diameter. At its center stood 4 stone pillars, each the height of a man, and covered in intricate carvings. The pillars formed a perfect square around a raised platform of black stone that seemed to absorb their flashlight beams. "My God," Sarah whispered. The pillars were bound together by chains carved from the same dark stone as the central platform. But as Daniel focused his camera on the nearest pillar, he realized the chains weren't merely decorative. They pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light, as though something within them was breathing. "Are you getting this?" he asked Marcus. "Yeah, but the footage is coming out weird. Look." Marcus turned his camera's LCD screen toward Daniel. The image showed the chamber, but the pillars appeared distorted, as though viewed through water. Shadows moved within the stone that weren't visible to the naked eye. Sarah approached the nearest pillar, her tablet's lead casting harsh light across the carved symbols.
This isn't just Hebrew and Aramaic. There are symbols here I don't recognize at all. They're older. Much older. How old? Pre-flood old. Daniel, these inscriptions reference the Watchers, the fallen angels mentioned in the book of Enoch. According to the text, 4 angels were bound here to await judgment for their crimes against heaven and earth. Daniel felt the familiar thrill of a breaking story mixed with something else, a deep unease that made his skin crawl. What crimes? Teaching humanity the arts of war, revealing the secrets of heaven, corrupting the bloodline of mankind. Sarah's voice grew distant as she translated. It says they were bound here by divine command, sentenced to wait until the time of the 6th trumpet, when they would be released to command an army of 200 million. Marcus lowered his camera. Doc, you're starting to freak me out. It's just mythology, Marcus. Ancient people trying to make sense of natural disasters and warfare. But even as Sarah spoke, Daniel noticed her backing away from the pillar. That's when they heard the sound. It started as a whisper, so faint that Daniel initially mistook it for wind moving through the chamber. But there was no wind here, 50 feet below ground. The whisper grew louder, resolving into what sounded like voices, multiple voices speaking in languages that predated any human tongue. "We need to go," Marcus said, his usual bravado replaced by naked fear. But Daniel was already moving toward the central platform, drawn by journalistic instinct and something else, a compulsion he couldn't name. The black stone was smooth as glass and warm to the touch, despite the chamber's chill. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, and as Daniel's flashlight played across them, they seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the chains binding the pillars. "Daniel, don't touch anything else." Sarah's warning came too late. Daniel's foot caught on a loose stone at the platform's edge. As he stumbled to catch his balance, his hand pressed against one of the carved symbols. The moment his skin made contact with the stone, the symbol blazed with light that burned his retinas. The whispers exploded into screams. The sound came from everywhere, the walls, the ceiling, the very air around them. But worse than the volume was the content. Daniel could suddenly understand every word, as though the touch had unlocked some primal linguistic center in his brain. The seal weakens, the time approaches. We have waited so long in darkness, the river runs red with the blood of nations. The appointed hour comes. Free us, son of Adam. Complete what you have begun. The chains around the pillars began to crack. "Run!" Sarah grabbed Daniel's arm, pulling him away from the platform. But as they turned toward the corridor, hairline fractures spread across the first pillar like lightning through granite. They scrambled up the ancient steps as the screaming intensified behind them. Daniel's burned hand throbbed with each heartbeat, and he could swear he felt something moving beneath his skin, something that pulsed in rhythm with whatever was awakening below. They emerged from the crypt as the sun touched the western horizon, painting the Euphrates blood red in the fading light. Behind them, the ground began to tremble. The bridge, Marcus pointed with a shaking hand. "Look at the bridge." Cracks spread across the concrete structure like a spider web, but the damage wasn't random. It followed precise geometric patterns that reminded Daniel of the symbols on the platform below. As they watched, sections of the bridge collapsed into the river, creating a series of perfect geometric holes. "We need to contact the authorities," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "The military, the archaeological society, someone." "And tell them what?" Daniel asked. "That we've accidentally unleashed biblical demons?" The screaming from below had stopped, replaced by something worse, laughter that seemed to bubble up from the riverbed itself. The water began to change color, shifting from muddy brown to rust red to a deep crimson that reflected the dying sunlight like liquid fire. That's when they saw the first one. It rose from the river like a mountain of shadow and flame, water streaming from wings that spanned 100 feet. Its face was hidden behind a mask of molten gold that hurt to look at directly, and its voice, when it spoke, made the previous screams sound like whispers. "Behold," it said, and the word shattered windows in Fallujah 5 miles away. "The seal ice broken. The hour of judgment I as a hand." 3 more forms erupted from the Euphrates. Each was unique in its horror. One wreathed in smoke that formed screaming faces, another bearing a crown of thorns that dripped liquid fire, the third carrying a sword that seemed to be forged from crystallized darkness. But all bore the same golden masks, and all spoke with voices that predated human language. "The army of the east shall rise," the first angel declared. 200 million strong shall they be, mounted on horses of fire and smoke and sulfur. As if summoned by its words, shapes began to emerge from the desert, translucent riders on spectral mounts, their hollow eyes glowing with the same light as the broken chains below. They formed ranks that stretched beyond the horizon, a ghost army waiting for the command to ride. Daniel's camera was in his hands without conscious thought, his finger working the shutter by pure instinct. Through the viewfinder, he watched as the fourth angel turned its golden mask toward him. "You have served your purpose, son of Adam," it said, and Daniel felt the words burn themselves into his brain. "But know this, those who look upon our true faces shall carry our image unto all nations. Through your eyes shall our glory spread, and through your voice shall our judgment be proclaimed." The angel raised its mask, revealing what lay beneath. Daniel's scream was lost in the sound of his camera's memory card melting in the device, but the image was already burned into his retinas, into his soul. He understood now why the ancients had bound these beings, not because they were evil, but because the human mind wasn't designed to comprehend such perfect, terrible beauty. Marcus was pulling at his arm, shouting something about leaving, but Daniel could barely hear him over the roaring in his ears. The ghostly army had begun to move, riding toward the setting sun in ranks that darkened the sky. Wherever their mounts' hooves touched the earth, fires sprang up, and the air filled with smoke that made breathing almost impossible. They ran. The jeep's engine turned over on the third try, and Marcus drove like a man possessed toward the main road. In the rearview mirror, Daniel watched the Euphrates burn. The water itself had become flame, and the four angels stood at its center like pillars of divine wrath, their voices raised in harmony that made the earth shake. "The recordings," Sarah gasped from the passenger seat. "Daniel, what about your footage?" Daniel looked down at his camera. The LCD screen was cracked but still functional. When he scrolled through the stored images, his heart sank. Every photograph was corrupted, not by technical malfunction but by something else. The angels' faces appeared in every frame, superimposed over the archaeological shots like a blessing and a curse combined. "We can't show these to anyone," he said. "What do you mean?" "Look at them, Sarah. Really look." She took the camera with trembling hands. The moment her eyes focused on the screen, her pupils dilated to black pinpoints. "I can see them," she whispered. "Even with my eyes closed, I can see their faces. They're so beautiful. Why didn't we free them sooner?" Daniel yanked the camera away and shut it off. But it was too late. Sarah's expression had changed, taking on the slack-jawed reverence of a convert. When she looked at him, he saw the golden light of the angels' masks reflected in her eyes. "We have to go back," she said with calm certainty. "We have to help them." Daniel realized with growing horror that the angels' curse was real. Anyone who saw their true faces, even in photographs, became their servant. The images were infectious, spreading their influence like a virus through media networks. His phone showed 17 missed calls from his editor, wanting the exclusive footage from Iraq. Behind them, the horizon glowed like a second sunset. The spectral army had reached the outskirts of Fallujah, and smoke columns were rising from the city. Radio chatter from military frequencies filled the air with desperate calls for reinforcement, reports of mass hallucinations, entire units going silent. Marcus pulled over at an abandoned gas station 20 miles from the river. "Danny, what the hell is happening?" Daniel looked at his friend, the only one who hadn't seen the angels' faces directly, and made his choice. Without a word, he opened the camera's battery compartment and pulled out the memory card. The plastic was warm to the touch, almost hot, and the stored images seemed to pulse with malevolent life. "Some truths are too dangerous to tell," he said, and threw the memory card into the station's cracked concrete, grinding it under his heel until nothing remained but plastic fragments and silicon dust. Sarah lunged for the remains, her fingers scrabbling in the dirt. "No, you don't understand. They showed me paradise. They showed me the end of suffering. They showed you what they wanted you to see." Daniel grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Sarah, you're an academic. You know the difference between primary sources and propaganda." For a moment, her expression flickered between rapture and reason. I can't stop seeing their faces. Even now they're speaking to me. What are they saying? That it's too late, that the seal was only the first. There are others, Daniel, prisons beneath Jerusalem, under the Nile, in the caves of Patmos. The four angels were just the beginning. Marcus was monitoring the radio, his face growing paler with each transmission. Baghdad's gone dark. So is Mosul. The military's calling it a coordinated terrorist attack, but the descriptions don't match anything in their playbook. Daniel closed his eyes, thinking of the ghostly riders spreading across the desert like a plague. 200 million strong, the angel had said. An army that existed in the space between life and death, visible to some, invisible to others, but deadly to all. "We're not going to report this," he decided. "Not any of it. Danny, Marcus, listen to me. If we report what we saw, people will want proof. If we show them the proof, they'll see what Sarah saw. The angels said their image spreads through observation. We'd be handing them the entire world's population. Sarah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You think hiding the truth will stop them? They've waited millennia for this moment. The Euphrates was just the beginning. They have servants in every nation now, people who've seen their faces, in dreams, in visions, in moments of despair. The army isn't just spectral riders, Daniel. It's everyone who's ever glimpsed paradise and found the real world wanting. A new sound reached them across the desert, singing, thousands of voices raised in harmony, coming from the direction of Fallujah. But the melody was wrong, built on intervals that hurt to hear, notes that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the bone. The river water, Daniel said suddenly, remembering the warnings carved into the crypt walls. Sarah, did you drink any water from the Euphrates? Why would I? She stopped, her hand moving to her throat. This morning, I was so thirsty and the water looked cleaner than usual. Just a sip. Daniel felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. The inscriptions had been clear. The river bound the angels' whispers to the soul. Anyone who drank from it became a conduit for their voices. Sarah's eyes were no longer her own. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the air shimmer. They offer knowledge, Daniel, the secrets of creation, the true names of God, the location of every hidden thing. All they ask in return is freedom, freedom to destroy the world, freedom to perfect it. Humanity is flawed, chaotic, prone to evil. They would remake us in their image, immortal, beautiful, pure. Her smile was radiant and terrible. I've seen the new earth they would create. No more war, no more hunger, no more death. Only order. And no more free will. Is that such a loss? Look what we've done with our freedom. Endless wars, environmental destruction, cruelty to our own kind. They offer something better. Daniel realized he was looking at humanity's future if the angels succeeded. Not extinction, but transformation into something that was no longer human. Perfect slaves singing perfect songs to perfect masters. The radio crackled with a new transmission. CNN was reporting mass hallucinations across the Middle East, with similar incidents beginning to manifest in major population centers worldwide. London, New York, Moscow, all reporting the same phenomenon. People claiming to see armies of angels in the sky, speaking in tongues, abandoning their jobs and families to gather in large groups and sing. It's spreading, Marcus whispered. Daniel looked at the broken fragments of his memory card scattered on the concrete. Such a small thing to carry such enormous consequences. He thought of his editor's calls, of the story that would make his career, of the truth the world deserved to know. But some truths were weapons of mass destruction. We're going silent, he said. No reports, no story, no contact with the outside world until we figure out how to stop this. You can't stop it, Sarah said with serene certainty. The seals are breaking all over the world. The angel spoke truly. This is the appointed time. The age of humanity ends tonight. As if to confirm her words, the northern sky began to glow with unnatural light. Through the desert air came the sound of wings, not 4 angels now, but hundreds rising from hidden prisons across the ancient world. Each carried a golden mask, and each mask reflected the face of every human who had ever glimpsed paradise and found the world wanting. Daniel thought of the whispers in the crypt, of the warm stone beneath his palm, of the choice he'd made in that moment of stumbling. He'd been sent to document the aftermath of war, but instead had become the catalyst for something far worse. The singing was getting closer. Marcus started the engine. Where do we go? Daniel looked at the radio, at Sarah's transformed face, at the growing light on the horizon. Somewhere out there, his editor was still waiting for the exclusive footage from Iraq. Somewhere out there, the world continued its daily routine, unaware that the age of angels had begun. He could still warn them. A single phone call to CNN, to the BBC, to anyone with a global platform. The truth would spread faster than any virus, and with it, the angel's influence would grow exponentially. But if he remained silent, how many would die in ignorance? Daniel, Sarah's voice carried impossible harmonies now, and when she looked at him, her eyes held depths that no human gaze should possess. They're offering you a choice. Join willingly and retain some fragment of what you were. Resist and become another voice in their choir, singing songs you'll never understand. And if I choose a third option, there is no third option. The seals are broken. The army rides. The only choice is whether you stand with the old world or the new. Behind them, Fallujah burned with light that had nothing to do with ordinary fire. The spectral riders had reached the city's outskirts, and their mounts' hooves struck sparks from the asphalt that bloomed into flowers of flame and sulfur. Wherever they rode, the dead rose to join their ranks, and the living fell to their knees in worship or terror. Daniel closed his eyes and made his choice. He pulled out his satellite phone and dialed his editor's direct line. When the familiar voice answered on the first ring, he spoke quickly, knowing he might not have another chance. "James, it's Daniel. I'm sending you everything I have from Iraq, the archaeological discovery, the footage, all of it. But listen to me carefully. Do not, under any circumstances, broadcast the photographs of the four figures. They're mimetic hazards. Anyone who sees them becomes infected." "Daniel, what the hell are you talking about? Infected with what?" "The truth," Daniel said, and hung up. He turned to Marcus. "Drive north, fast as you can. What about warning people?" "I just did. James will know what to do with the information." Daniel hoped that was true. His editor had covered enough conspiracy theories to recognize a genuine existential threat when he saw one. Sarah began to laugh, a sound like silver bells mixed with breaking glass. "You think your human authorities can contain what has been unleashed? The angels have servants in every government, every military, every institution of power. They've been preparing for this moment since before your civilization began. Then why wait until now? Because the seals required a willing hand to break them. Free will was built into creation itself. Even divine judgment must be chosen, not imposed." Her smile was radiant with terrible joy. "You chose, Daniel. In that moment when you touched the stone, you chose for all humanity." Daniel felt the weight of that choice settling on his shoulders like lead. How many billions would die because of his stumble in the dark? How many would be transformed into something no longer human? But as they drove through the night, fleeing the light that now consumed half the sky, he realized something else. The choice hadn't been his alone. Every war, every act of cruelty, every moment when humanity had chosen violence over peace, all of it had weakened the seals. He had simply been the final straw, the last drop of water that caused the dam to burst. The radio fell silent except for static. Then, cutting through the white noise, came a voice that Daniel recognized, his own but changed, speaking words he'd never said in a language he'd never learned. "This is Daniel Mercer, reporting from Iraq. I have witnessed the return of heaven's judgment upon the earth. The age of angels has begun. Bow down and worship, for the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdom of our Lord and of his servants forever and ever." Marcus stopped the jeep so suddenly that Daniel was thrown against the dashboard. "That's impossible. You're right here." But when Daniel looked in the rearview mirror, he saw his own face staring back from every surface that could hold a reflection. The windows, the polished chrome, even the standing water in the roadside ditches. Each image spoke with the voice of the angels, proclaiming the new order that would sweep across the earth like wildfire. "The infection spreads through observation," he whispered, understanding at last. "Not just the photographs, any image, any reflection, any representation. They're using my face as a transmission vector." Sarah nodded from the back seat, where she sat with her hands folded like a statue of serenity. The first angel spoke truly. "Through your eyes shall their glory spread, and through your voice shall their judgment be proclaimed. You are their herald now, whether you choose to be or not." Daniel closed his eyes, but even behind his lids he could see the four faces of molten gold. They were beautiful beyond description and terrible beyond comprehension, and they spoke to him with voices like the sound of many waters. "Your work is not finished, son of Adam. There are other seals, other prisons, other keys that must be turned. Will you serve willingly, or must we compel you?" When Daniel opened his eyes, the world had changed. Colors were more vivid, sounds carried harmonic overtones he'd never noticed, and the very air seemed to pulse with living music. He could see the spectral army spreading across the landscape like a tide of light and shadow, and he understood that what others would perceive as apocalypse was actually a kind of birth. "I'll make you a deal," he said to the presence that filled his mind. "You are not in a position to make deals. I am if you want me to serve willingly. Let me warn them. Let me give humanity a chance to prepare, to choose for themselves whether to accept your new order or fight it. If I'm truly your herald, then let me herald the truth. All of it, not just your version." The presence considered this, and Daniel felt its attention like sunlight focused through a magnifying glass. Finally it spoke. "Very well, speak your truth, son of Adam. But know that every word you say will serve our purpose in the end. Truth has a way of revealing itself, regardless of the speaker's intentions." Daniel felt his phone vibrate with an incoming call. James again, probably wondering about the cryptic message. Around them the desert bloomed with unnatural flowers, plants that grew from sand and stone, their petals formed from crystallized music and their roots extending into dimensions that human geometry couldn't describe. He answered the phone. "James, it's me again. I need you to listen very carefully." As Daniel spoke, telling his editor everything, the crypt, the angels, the spreading infection, the choice that faced humanity, he watched the dawn break over a world that would never be the same. The sun rose crimson through smoke that carried voices, and in that light, the age of angels began. Behind them, the Euphrates burned like a river of stars, and 4 figures stood at its center, their golden masks reflecting the face of every soul who had ever longed for paradise and been willing to pay any price to achieve it. The seals were broken. The appointed time had come. And somewhere in a newsroom in Washington, an editor looked at photographs that shouldn't exist and made his own choice about what truths were safe to tell. The story would spread, Daniel knew. Truth always did. But whether it would serve as warning or catalyst, salvation or damnation, remained to be seen. The age of angels had begun. But the age of choice had not yet ended.